The first time she saw him, she was brushing her teeth. I remember the way she told me, like she was embarrassed, as if the moment had been too mundane to contain any real fear. A glimmer in the window above the sink, the faint outline of a man standing motionless by the garden fence. She'd looked again, squinting through the fogged glass, but when the backyard lights flicked on, the space was empty. Just her own reflection staring back from the darkness. That was 3 weeks ago. I know because she called me that night, her voice tight with something she barely understood. "I think I saw someone," she whispered. But it was probably just a weird reflection. Maybe the lamp behind me. Her house sat alone on the edge of the woods, one of those old colonials with deep eaves and creaking floors, the kind that holds on to sound longer than it should. The windows were everywhere, dozens of them. Narrow, tall, some shuttered, some bare. Depending on where you stood, you could see straight through the ground floor, from the front porch to the back patio. She'd lived there alone for 2 years, after the divorce. I offered to stay over, but she said no. Not then. The sightings didn't stop. They never got clearer either, which is what haunted her most. Little things, a blur of movement beyond the glass, a figure standing too still for shadows, the sensation, deep and instinctual, that someone was watching her from just beyond the reach of the light. But whenever she turned on the yard lights, it was gone. The dark became a mirror. She started closing the curtains at night. All of them. Even the ones in the laundry room. Even the small one in the upstairs hallway that looked over the back stretch of yard. But sometimes she forgot. One night, she called again. This time, I picked up in the middle of a thunderstorm. Her voice was shaking, but not from fear. She was angry. He was there. I saw him. This isn't in my head. I asked what happened. She told me she'd gone into the kitchen for water around midnight. The rain was pounding the windows, the sort of night where every shadow feels like it's reaching inward. She caught sight of movement near the hedges. Just a flicker. But he was standing closer than before. Still, watching. When she hit the switch for the yard lights, he vanished again. Just a ghost of her own reflection staring back. That was the moment everything shifted. She asked me to come stay. Of course I did. When I got there the next evening, she looked exhausted, pale. Her windows were covered with thick curtains, drawn tight like bandages. There were smudges on the glass where she'd pressed her hands, maybe several times, trying to see out. "I think he's trying to get in," she said quietly. I joked, tried to laugh it off, but there was no humor in her expression. She hadn't slept much. She said the sounds had started 3 nights ago. A soft knock on the window pane, tapping in patterns like someone was trying to write a word. Sometimes late enough that she doubted she'd heard it at all. Sometimes so close it felt like breath. I stayed in the guest room that night, 2nd floor, facing the backyard, just in case. At 2:11 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. There was no sound, no movement, just stillness. But I felt watched. I crossed to the window and parted the curtain an inch. The yard lights were off, the garden black, but I could see the faint glow from the kitchen window below mine, where she'd left a lamp on. That's when I saw it. Not a figure exactly, just the idea of one, low on the edge of the woods, like the space around it was denser, darker. I reached for the switch and flooded the yard with light. Gone. Nothing but trees and my own distorted reflection in the glass. I didn't sleep after that. Neither did she. The next morning, She admitted she'd considered boarding the windows, not for safety, but so she wouldn't ever see him again, real or not. I asked if she thought he was real. She said, "I don't know, but I feel him every night." I offered to set up cameras, motion sensors, anything. She refused. What if they catch something? What if they don't? She started hearing footsteps the following week. Not inside, not yet, but outside the house, late, when the wind was still and the cicadas silent. She described them as slow, measured, deliberate. Sometimes they crunched along the gravel path beside the house, sometimes on the grass, circling. Once, she heard them stop beneath her bedroom window. She didn't look. She couldn't. And always, when she gathered the courage to flip on the outside lights, nothing. The lights never caught anything but her own reflection. It was as if the house itself was complicit, wrapping her inside a prism of mirrors, every pane of glass a window not just out, but in. Then something changed. Last Thursday, she called me in the middle of the day. Her voice was thin, like she'd been crying for hours. She told me she'd found something. A smudge on the outside of the living room window. A perfect handprint. Pressed against the glass. Fingers splayed, palm wide. On the second floor. There was no balcony, no ledge, no tree close enough to climb. Just a sheer drop to the grass below, and the unmistakable outline of a hand. I came over immediately. It was real. I touched it myself. The smudge was faint but undeniably shaped. Long fingers, deep curvature. I ran a ladder up from the shed, climbed to the window. No scratches on the siding, no scuffs on the paint. Nothing to suggest how anyone could have reached that high. But the handprint was there. And as I stood on the ladder, I felt the breeze behind me stop. It wasn't the weather, it was presence. That night I begged her to leave, to stay at my place, anywhere but there. But she refused. "I think he wants me to run," she said. "I think that's how he wins." So I stayed again. That evening, we sat in the living room with all the curtains drawn. Every light in the backyard was on, casting long shadows through the trees. We didn't say much, just waited. At exactly 1:37 a.m., the lights went out, all of them, simultaneously. No flicker, no power surge, just darkness. And then, something moved in the window across from us. A glimmer, the shape of a man. He was close this time, so close I could see the angle of his shoulders, the slight tilt of his head. I reached for the switch, but stopped, because I understood finally. The lights didn't chase him away. They revealed nothing. They turned the glass into a mirror. The only thing they ever showed us was our own fear, and he knew it. I turned away from the switch, watched as the shape grew clearer. He didn't move, just stood there, his face hidden behind the reflection, but close enough I could almost hear him breathing. That's when she whispered, "He's inside." I turned, but she wasn't looking at the window anymore. She was looking at the stairwell behind us, and it was then that I understood the worst part. He was never outside. Not really. The windows had been the distraction, the reflections, the lure. While our eyes were drawn outward, straining through glass, he was already in the house, watching with us, standing just beyond the glow of the kitchen lamp, waiting for us to see him exactly when he wanted us to. And by then, it was far too late.